Hello and welcome to another Dwarven Tavern video. I am Dr. Jeff Goins, and with me in the tavern today are
Lyric
and Ian.
And we have a really cool subject this time, I believe, because the question has come up kind of passively through the years. It started with the Saints campaign that we are playing, and the question is secondary characters. Question mark.
Yeah, that's actually it.
Yeah.
The question is, it's secondary characters, how and why should they be a thing?
Secondary characters. How?
Why?
Why? Well, and the reason that this is such a controversial topic is that they all played a main character. They started out with one character in the campaign, and I suggested that they roll up secondary characters in case one of their main characters died, which I guess kind of answers the first part of that question, why have a secondary character, as a backup. So they did. They rolled up secondary characters, and as you might expect, if you've ever rolled up a secondary character, their secondary characters leveled up pretty quickly, close behind the main characters because of the way the experience points are.
Yeah, but they'll always be like, 2 or 3 levels behind at all times.
Well, I also feel like it's both true and it's not true, because the first level characters were at like 4th level by the time our secondary characters came in, and they were behind, but I feel like they didn't interact in conflict. I'm not going to even say battle, but conflict, as much as the first characters did.
The experience giving stuff.
Right, so they not only didn't level up with the first characters, but they also I feel like they also leveled up slower in comparison.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
well, the experience points bonuses for their participation were,
all of
limited.
the generic experience points that we would get every game, like the session bonus and the role playing and the skill point checks that we would have, those were all given across the board. But things like
the great value skill points, the great value.
That's a Walmart joke.
It was.
But the experience points that were given, like if Ulf Tarkin which was Ian's main character, if he was in battle, then his secondary character, Mia, who was a cleric, she didn't get as much because Ulf Tarkin was doing a lot of the damage, while Mia was kind of just there.
Yeah, it's like she was a cleric. It's like, and clerics they have a really important role if anybody ever actually gets hurt or needs to be blessed, or the demons aren't dead already.
Very specific requirement.
Yeah, it's like
undead turning.
It's like when your cleric is a lower level than all of the people who already do the job. It's like, well, we have a paladin, we have a murder everything fighter, we have a murder everything monk. It's like they kind of cover all my bases.
Well, that's also getting into more detail with what the characters were. This is kind of a broader topic.
Yeah.
In that, that's also a very important point to have in consideration when making secondary characters.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you're playing a mainly non-magical campaign, which is like mostly barbarians, mostly fighters and monks, and characters that don't really focus on like high-end magic, and then you have a secondary character come in who's the same class as your primary, it's like they're never going to be as good ever.
They're always going to be in conflict rather than in assistance to your main character.
Mm.
And you're constantly going to be striving to find a use for them.
Yeah, and one of the things in my dungeon called the Volgan campaign, every person, there were 2 players in this. It was my friends Gary and Jeff, and they each had 4 characters.
That's a lot.
They had 4 characters each, so it was 8 characters, and I don't know, because their characters were like 5th level when they started. So I don't really know what their process was of selecting character class. But
it may have just been random.
It was really weird too, because it wasn't like none of their characters were like secondary characters. All of their characters were like primary that they played separate but equal. It was very segregated.
My question,
apparently.
My question into this is how important should a secondary character be? Like
before even that question, I feel like it goes back to why is it necessary?
The whole reason that you guys came up with secondary characters in the first place was to have a backup in case one of your main characters died.
That's one reason. And I don't feel like that should be...
Well, it's very meta.
Well, I feel like it shouldn't be a good enough reason to include a secondary character. I feel like the main reason... Well, not even that. I feel like a good reason that a secondary character should be added is to add more character to the story. It should be, like, if you feel you
just
can expand...
most stuff.
If you feel like you can expand on the story with additional personality, then a secondary character could be included. Because, as you mentioned with Gary and Jeff, I don't like calling him that, Bentel, those characters all felt equal because they were all rolled up together.
Yeah.
So you guys wanted a big campaign with very limited players that didn't stop you. You were able to roll up those characters all together. So I feel like secondary characters, the way that we rolled them up for the Saints campaign, that's exactly what they were.
Well, what classifies a character as a secondary? Is it just the one you roll up next, or is it like what puts them in the secondary position?
It might have been the mindset. It might have been the mindset behind the character.
How many main characters can one person play?
I think the Saints campaign, going along with the mindset, is that the Saints campaign, the meta reason of if our main characters die, at least we have these, and that at least we have these meant that they weren't as important.
Yeah, and it really became very apparent
very
quickly.
It was more of a mindset than a mechanic.
Yeah. So having secondary characters should be just as important as main characters if there is no other reason to have them. Like, if you're having secondary characters for a very specific reason, like they're your other characters' kids or siblings, or if they have some sort of crossover that we have a lot, where we bring in old characters and new campaigns.
One of the things that I always have a problem with characters coming in later is the unilateral XP. The fact that they're all on the same XP list, and if they're not, then you always have one character just, skyrockets the level, everyone just sucks.
Or vice versa. There's always someone left behind.
And it's like, if you've got a bunch of new players and one guy is the wizard, and you're doing non-unilateral XP, and it's going off of kills, stuff done, points of interest found, and you've got someone who's played a wizard before. And it's just like, they'll be 15th level before anybody else reaches 10. And then your entire campaign is just going to crumble in on itself because no one's going to want to play with this powerhouse.
Okay, so one of the questions is, why are they necessary? Okay, which before that you should say, are they necessary? Is it necessary to have secondary characters?
No, it isn't. Because if you start a game off, you don't think about having secondary characters. You roll up one character, even new characters.
I would say most players don't automatically think about starting up multiple characters when they play something.
That's what I'm saying, is that when you automatically, if you're a new player and you're playing D&D or Pathfinder or Traveler for the first time, you don't think to roll up multiple characters.
No.
So no, they're not necessary.
Especially not Traveler.
Yeah. Now, do they add to the game? Absolutely. Are they fun? Hell yeah. Necessary? Not really.
Hey Lobo, check it out.
It'd be
some of the best lines.
It'd be extremely easy to create a whole list of characters in GURPS.
Yeah.
Because you could just be like, okay, and then they're rolled up because
right.
it's GURPS.
Yeah. So it's not why. No, actually, that's not true. It's not what you do; it's why you do it. This is actually my philosophy in life in general. Is that it's not what you do that matters; it's why you do it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, good and evil are subjective. You know, it's all about benevolence and malice. And,
Malevolence.
Benevolence and malevolence, yeah.
Malevolence.
Hey, lady! So, that is truly the case. Because if, okay, you have, like, for example, I had a character, my first character, Sargoth, that was made so many years ago. He had a servant, and then he had a son, and both of those became characters. At first, he bought some guard dogs, some trained guard dogs. That, you know, they quickly went the way of the dodo because
which is really sad.
Yeah, it really is, because back then, you know, first edition, they didn't level up with your character until later on. They made rules for animal companions that level up, whether magical or not. But my point was that I had a reason to bring those secondary characters in. You know, my servant, my character Gazaran, had a man-at-arms that he hired as kind of a bodyguard because he was a bard. Even though he was a first ed bard, which was fighter, then thief, then bard, you know, which makes you pretty strong, you know, by the time you get to be a bard.
Yeah, just kind of an unadulterated badass at that point.
Yeah, pretty much so. And,
like, you know, the title of bard isn't just something that's like, oh, we'll be a bard. It's like first level bard. It's not a thing. Not a thing in first ed.
Bring thap. Oh! That's, you know.
That progression actually does make more sense than just starting out as a bard.
Because you have to actually have been around to have stories.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, yeah. He had a manservant that was a half ogre. So it was his little tiny me and great big him. He later died in a prefabricated module called the Chateau de Amberville. So there was a reason, and all of my
another point on that. My first edition character, Drum.
Yeah.
It's like he has 4 war boars, and he also has 4 soldiers, which he still needs to go get. But
4 war boars. 4 war boars.
Yeah, very good. But yeah, he's got these 4 battle boars, and and they're like in first edition. Starting out with yourself, you feel like you could die at any moment at all times because you can. But these battle boars tend to start out with 3 hit dice each.
Battle pigs.
And they each have 3d4 bite attacks. So it's like I've got 12d4 and what the hell, 12 hit dice. Yeah, 12 dice of damage and 12 hit dice worth of companions.
And, you know, pigs are very intelligent. They're supposed to be smarter than dogs, so they're very trainable. And it's you had the gold to buy them, so everything that happened there was very reasonable.
And it's like they've saved our biscuits. Like
your bacon, as it were.
Don't call them bacon.
Don't call them bacon. One guy called them bacon at a bridge.
And he did now.
Don't do that.
He did. But yeah, and that was a very good reason. So
it's like they were actually but in 3.5 and in 5th, and you know, honestly, all of the editions beyond first, really, you don't have to have companions.
Right.
Most characters in most campaigns can solo.
Well, I agree with you because my secondary character Lobo, he had a wolf companion because I was super creative. And his name was Anyway. I've mentioned him before in our animal companion video. He was handy in battle for about
2 levels.
Well, I was gonna say about 5 levels because he's 12th level right now.
Yeah.
And we rolled him up as first level characters, so he was of great assistance while I was figuring out how to play a druid.
And I can't stand this switch out your animal companion. It's like, What are we just gonna? It's like, oh, my dog isn't strong enough. I'm gonna go to the dragon's form. It's like, just switch out your
Sorry,
cat.
my lifelong companion, but I gotta put you up for adoption. I'm like, woof.
Yeah, it's like what the hell? It's like no one just switches. Like I was like, yeah, I've had this cat for 10 years. I'm gonna do it.
So I take that very harsh because I have had a cat for 10 years.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, imagine.
Nope.
Imagine if
Don't.
you.
Don't even finish that.
The druid had to have raised that animal to adulthood, meaning
you know what I
to
would
combat level.
If a person would do that in one of my campaigns, they would lose levels.
Oh.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the topic
I have no intention of doing
Inoue, who was Lobo's animal companion, he became less and less useful until the point where I actually forgot he was in the game, and that was my animal companion, and that was kind of my tertiary character, because I had Akathin, my half orc. I almost said a half-elf, which would still be correct. Monk, and my secondary character...
He is, though.
Yeah, I know.
He's a half-elf, half-orc. I know, calling him a half-elf is weird.
He technically is, though.
Well, but the orc is dominant.
Yeah.
He's an elk.
Yes, he is!
Is that an elk? Is that how elves?
That was actually accurate.
Anyway, I had Akathin, then I had Lobo, and then I had Inoue. And so I had 3 characters to play, and that third character was just not important after a while. And that was mostly because Lobo himself was being forgotten as a secondary character.
Like Lobo didn't feel like he had a use. So the character that was weaker than Lobo even had less of a use.
Lobo, and I think I mentioned this in a video already, but Lobo, in our most recent Saints campaign, was kind of awoken, if you will, in that he awoken.
Woke.
I'm watching wrestling, so if any of you get that reference, he was awakened. Thank you. And
they slap it to a Slim Jim. Yeah.
That's not the right person, but
not
yeah.
the right generation either.
He experienced power that was unleashed because Lyric finally learned how to play Druid. And suddenly...
Oh yeah, I have 5th level spells! Earth Punch!
and suddenly my secondary character became Relevant.
Relevant?
I can't talk today! So I think that's another good point, is that the secondary characters aren't important if you don't make them important.
That's exactly right.
Your secondary characters can only be important if you know how to play that character, because I didn't know how to play either a monk or a druid. And I started out playing the monk, got a good handle on that, and then I started the druid. I never had the chance to really focus on that because I still had the monk. Mm-hmm. And lately, I have been focusing on how to play druid because I wisened up, and suddenly the character feels not equal with Akathin, but important for once. And one of his character gimmicks was that he was the younger twin of another Tavernier's character, and he was kind of the shadow of that character. His personality was just remnants.
He was already a secondary to a secondary.
Right, so, like, and I guess that was a way for me as an inexperienced gamer to just hand him off as an unimportant thing to worry about, because, I'll just do whatever my older brother's doing. And this is both a realization that I had and my character had, in that he was better than that. He's powerful, and I was really not giving him what he deserved as a character, and then boom, all of a sudden he was important.
Yeah, because, by this time, what was Lobo? 10th level? 12th?
He's 12th level right now.
Yeah, a 12th level character that, up to that point, had done nothing significant.
Right. So, and then all of a sudden, hey, I can use
wait a minute! I'm 12th level!
So secondary characters are not necessary,
Quite a
but
revelation.
they can be if you make them. Which is the underlying theme of this video, is that they're not necessary, but they can be if you want them to be.
So,
Speaking of animal companions.
Animal companions. Problems that arise with them. Well, they never leave you the heck alone.
I feel like the thing that you're going to bring up next is that the problems that you can have with secondary characters is everything we've stated up to this point.
Everything we've stated so far, because the one problem is, and this is purely logistical, is if the Dungeon Master designs a campaign for 4 people, for 4 characters, and suddenly there are 8, then it becomes a logistical issue for the Dungeon Master, which, a good Dungeon Master can make allowances.
And I think it was very chaotic.
Little side quests.
I've never really understood. Like, I cannot stand power scaling. Like, there's quite a few video games I will not play anymore because the power scaling is infuriating. It's like, well, this thing is this easy to kill. Well, now you have 2 characters. I double its hit points and double its damage and double its attacks. It's like, well, you just quadruple its damage. It's like, no, don't question me, I'm DM. It's like, but, okay, so why even have multiple characters? It's like, so, applause. It's like, why would you want to bring 8 characters to something that is like, okay, normally it was split into 4 parts, to where, it's got, for example, like 4 characters, you're fighting 4 hit die monsters. And you bring in 8 characters, now you're fighting 8 hit die monsters. It's like, okay, so now all of the other characters are just halved in strength.
I think that's a problem with the DM not knowing.
I know.
Yeah, that's a Dungeon Master thing.
If you bring in a lot of characters or something, it should be easier. That's why you have a lot of characters.
Yeah, that's true for any group of anything. Like, if you have a group project, the project should be easier to do because you have multiple people.
That's why you have multiple people. And it's like, it's so aggravating.
Otherwise, college, it is, but it would be meaningless without group projects.
I hate group projects.
They're the bane of my existence.
Yep.
And it's like, it's annoying to me to see other DMs and other players have this, it's like, okay, there's more players, so I gotta scale it up. And it's like, no, you don't. The reason there are more players there is to make the thing easy.
It should be scaled up. I think everything should be done in moderation to the story, and I think that's what a problem a lot of DMs have, is that they think they have to add more difficulty to the story because...
They think that, like, I've seen a lot of DMs that are like, okay, I have to make it difficult. Like, no, you don't. They're like, if they're slaughtering everything, then the world will react to there being this huge zone of everything being slaughtered. Bigger enemies will come because everything's dying.
That mindset also goes with the fact that that could be said for an inexperienced DM or a DM who equates Dungeons and Dragons to video games. It's like, there are some things that don't convert with that mindset. Is that it doesn't have to always be about the combat. Which you should check out some of our other videos because we do talk about that as well.
Well, I had a Dungeon Master who, you went into room 1 and there was an orc and you killed it and you got a gold piece. And then in room 2 there were 2 orcs and we found a treasure chest that had 2 gold pieces in it. In the 3rd room there were 3 orcs and the pattern began to emerge.
Well, let me guess, there was 3 gold
pieces. Yeah.
Were they tucked in the corners of the room?
No, they were in a small treasure chest.
Wow.
And in the 4th room, the pyrohydrant.
Oh man, that would be so fun as the DM.
But see, here's the thing.
Super linear, and then just like, and it's like, okay, it burns in the last room, and it's a dragon.
Big red.
The campaign's over.
Game over.
And that's what you get for assuming, kids.
What have we learned today?
That the DM owns everything.
But what that actual part comes down to is I've always, as the primary Dungeon Master, I guess, it's always been my appointment to myself to be challenging, to tell a really good story, to make my players think, to survive, and to have fun, I think, above all. But which our next video is going to be something about along those lines.
Yeah, you don't want the game to overplay the fun.
Because if it's too challenging, it's not fun.
Well,
if it's not challenging enough, it's not fun.
You want it to be really fun, and you don't want like the game to creep in as like, oh well, the game says this. Instead of let's have fun with this. It's just like, no, you can't. It's like
you go
can't
in
because it's a game.
Yeah, you go in at first level and it's a kobold and you kill it and you get a sword and then you're like 15 levels down. I'm 37th level and you face the guardian of the mystical Vorpal sword, and it's a kobold also.
It all relates.
I would be terrified.
That kobold earned that.
If there's a kobold with a Vorpal sword, and you're 37th level, and that's it.
Bye.
It's like,
Peace out. I'm good.
That's your. I'm out.
Bye, Visa. Like, you can keep it.
Dimension door. I'm gone.
Just dimension door behind you.
What's over there?
Fall backwards. It's like, oh, when the plane of fire, it's better here.
Drink a cup of coffee. This is fine.
This is fine.
Scaling.
My cheeks hurt.
But back to the secondary character thing. Two do's are very important.
Do's?
Have a reason. Just bringing in, and I think that reason is what escaped us in the Saints campaign.
Yeah. Well, it's like if your reason is just to be a double strong person.
Yeah, just to have.
If you bring two fighters with the exact same loadout and the exact same stats build and the exact same equipment, it's like you're just doubling yourself. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, I got a copy machine. Rolling my character.
They call me Copesta.
We're twins. Copy and paste. And so have a good reason. Have a good reason. Even if it's something as simple as, my character should have a man at arms.
Or my character is married.
like the Cord campaign.
Yeah.
Tavern Josh has a character who was a bard, and I think he should stay a bard, honestly.
I agree.
He has a bard, and he wanted to go...
I think multiclassing would be fine.
Multiclassing, yeah.
Sure. Well, he is kind of surrounded by barbarians.
Right, so he would pick stuff up. That makes it a reason, right?
He kind of have to pick stuff up.
He's not allowed to not know anything like that.
Pick that up. But I'm a bard. Pick it up.
Oh, wait, he's dead.
Oh, well, get another bard. He had the idea, he wanted to chronicle the Underdark, so he wanted to get, being a bard, a third age bard.
A scholar, if you will.
He wanted to be a scholar. He wanted to chronicle and document, the Drow.
I don't think he was I don't think he was very musical so much as he was.
Yeah, he was
searching for knowledge.
like a skald.
Yes, I know what that means.
Yeah, he's doing the whole gather stories thing.
Yeah. The music will come later, and as mentioned before.
Indeed.
And so the thought of him having bodyguards was why he came to the Temple of Cord and found our characters, which were worshippers of Cord. So we were very burly and pow and fighty. So in that case, we are like the secondary characters to the bard. Yeah. But instead of him having more characters himself, we played them. So
it's along that same
good reason.
That's along that same mindset of you should take that example and do it exactly as you said. That should be the same reason that you have secondary characters.
Exactly. Exactly. It should make sense
that
you have secondary characters.
And it shouldn't be a meta reason.
Copy paste.
That was the problem.
Right, no copy paste.
Use our mistake as something for you to learn by, is that you shouldn't metagame a reason to have another character.
Our character, we had secondary characters to just be secondaries if we lost our primaries, and they didn't really have any character because that's not what they were meant to be.
And they were brought into the campaign questionably. Suddenly they were there. Oh, we had the same dream, prophetic dream too. We'd like to join. Oh, you look trustworthy. Join our party. And that's how they were, and that really didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I feel like we've already done this before, where we take our and this is a way to help your secondary characters catch up is that we had solo campaigns for each of these secondary characters.
Catch up.
Excuse me. And these secondary characters experience stuff that help them develop better. I feel like we should do that again.
Yeah.
Now that we've understood this part, but that's something that if you have fallen into this trap,
Now that we understand.
What?
You said have understood.
Lord. Now that we understand that, and this can help you too, is if you fall into the same trap, you can take your character, the secondary character, put them somewhere else for a little bit, and then bring them back to the main campaign, and then it'll feel like you have two main characters rather than 1 and 2, A and B.
Primary and backup.
Well, it's more like, the secondary character is kind of like a bullet point under the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is that the second character is just a hand wave that's not really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and another really strong do about doing your character is to learn the character. Like when you said you were like 12th level and, oh wait, I'm a druid.
And then this twin was like, oh my god, what is happening?
Yeah. So, learn the character. Don't just roll up a character to have a character because it's meta, and we hate meta, right?
Which, I mean, this is a giant example that we do it too, and it's a learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I think everybody probably does it.
Yeah.
We're not perfect. We just
we
learn from our mistakes.
We try to improve. We try to constantly improve our
Yes,
game.
we are.
Well,
I'm not.
Some
perfect.
of us are.
I'm not. I make mistakes. I learn from them. That's how I get better.
That's good. Good.
You're right. I suck.
And a huge don't is just don't have the secondary characters just tag along.
I think the problem with the mindset...
tag along characters in general, honestly.
The problem with the mindset of secondary characters is that secondary is part of that statement. Is that when you think secondary, you automatically think background. You think not the main.
In case the
secondary
primary
weapon
dies.
Yeah. That's not the thing that you automatically go to. And... you can have secondary characters, but just don't think of them with that word attached. Mm. Like, they may be secondary characters, but they're not secondary to the other characters. They are just as important, they just maybe came in late.
Yeah, it's always a very interesting point when you're playing characters, is like, you can see who's the higher level. Like, if you have a 10th level fighter and a 5th level fighter. So you can see who's the higher level, they can't.
Yeah.
Characters can't tell.
Right.
They can tell in experience, like with their fighting prowess.
Like they watch him murder everything, and they're like, I can do that. And they get wrecked immediately. They're like, he is a badass.
Yeah. So, which brings up the question: should secondaries overtake the main? And I think that's entirely feasible.
That's
I think
debatable.
It's possible. It depends on your characters, because
it depends on the campaign.
Yeah.
It depends on what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think either the DM or the player should have a say in that. I think what happens should happen.
That is exactly it. Like, you should not. If the DM and the player stop it. If the DM and the player have a say, it's metagaming. Everything that, if the secondary character is taking over the main character, that's what the story calls for. So that, and if you as a player don't like that, then don't, I feel like that's, like, if you do anything to change that, that's going against your character.
It's meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you can indulge in meta if you have to.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you should ever go out of your way to indulge in meta. It's like, wait a second. I can mess with the rules.
Where is that rule book?
And the DM's like, can you not?
Sprint.
Bad player.
Yeah, because, DMs have a hard time because they have to deal with all you people.
Yeah, so
the do's and the don'ts of secondary characters. No, they're not necessary, but they can be if you want them to be. They can take over the main characters if the story calls for it. There should be a reason for the characters, and it should not be a meta reason. And what was the
like
last
honestly,
one?
us creating secondary characters so we had a backup was complete
That was
meta.
awful.
We shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But which is why I suggest for future reference.
Yeah, because it
we
also
should
made
play them again.
it made our primary characters a little bit more reckless because we have secondaries made specifically.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
And we burned to death. Bye!
You've seen it here first.
You've seen it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
And what was the last point that I missed?
The last point was the learn the character.
Yeah, learn.
You don't just roll up a character to roll up a character.
Yeah,
That's meta.
Make the character, and that goes in with the. Yeah. It has to have a reason.
So that kind of answers all of the questions. Don't meta.
Don't metagame.
Don't
that
metagame.
is the
if
reason.
you don't metagame, then everything will make sense. Everything will have a reason. Everything you will know.
Because the game's kind of designed around not doing that thing.
Yeah.
It's like, if you take the rules hard-coded the entire time, you're not actually role-playing.
Yeah.
Because it's a role-playing game.
You're supposed to role-play.
Yeah, it's like, it's like the rules say you can't do this. It's like, yeah, but I'm holding a boulder up with my hands. It's like, you can't hold a boulder up because your strength is this. It's like, but I'm doing it. The DM's like, well, fine, whatever.
Yeah, your shoulders pop out and you die.
Yeah, you dead.
But I'm Sisyphus.
I get it.
I'm glad.
I'm pretty sure
get it.
most reviews.
Most of you guys will get that too.
So.
Who was Sisyphus? Put it in the comments.
So that pretty much wraps up the secondary
I think so.
talk.
So yeah, don't metagame, have good reason, learn your character, and you'll be good. And everything else can just flow as it flows.
And if you've already done any of the don'ts, use our do's to make up for it, and that should solve the problems. Toot sweet.
We should make a T-shirt. Use the do's.
Use the do's. That sounds
I'm pretty sure that's trademark.
Inappropriate.
I'm almost certain that's got to be trademarked.
It probably is. It should be. So, with that being said, we would like to wish everyone Gedul Marg
Iklaladran. Happy holidays from the Dwarves.
From the Dwarves.
From the Dwarves.
And on behalf of the entire cast and crew of the Dwarven Tavern, I am Dr. Jeff Goins.
I am Lyric.
I'm Ian.
And we wish for you to want for nothing but adventure, and at first I feared it,
Then
I charged.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.